Have you ever heard the saying, going to Cambodia is easy, but returning is hard? Uncle Ba doesn't know about other countries, but in Vietnam, especially in provinces bordering Cambodia like in Giang or Tay Ninh, these areas often have gambling spots, known as casinos, across the border in Cambodia. While these places can relieve stress and bring joy, hidden dangers exist, like loan shark rings and black markets for lending money. Many who haven't stepped into a Cambodian casino don't realize that once gambling gets into your system, you become tempted and can't stop playing. If you lose, you want to win back what you lost, so you keep playing. If people just played, ran out of money, and went home, there wouldn't be a problem. However, Uncle Ba has witnessed many cases where people who lost would borrow money to keep playing. Then, if they couldn't repay the debt, they would be detained until their relatives came with ransom money. Of course, they would only be released after payment. If not, their fingers or toes might be cut off, mainly to scare family members into bringing money for ransom. Because of such heartbreaking incidents, Uncle Ba has a story to share today. This story was told to Uncle Ba by a young man who worked for a long time as an employee in a casino near the Cambodian border. He still works in Cambodia, but not for that casino because it closed down. The former casino, employees, story 2014-2015, the young man recounted that in 2014-2015, he went to Cambodia to work at a very grand casino. It had just opened and was 5 stories tall and extremely large. The employee benefits were comprehensive. Behind the 5-story tower, there was a basketball court, a very spacious parking garage for employees, and a 3-story dormitory for them to sleep. Further behind, there was a vast bamboo forest. Initially, the casino did very well. After a while, they began collaborating closely with Chinese merchants, as Cambodia has a strong relationship with China. These Chinese merchants then leased the entire casino. There were Chinese managers, many Vietnamese employees, around 60 to 70 people, Cambodian employees, around 30 to 40, and about 10 Chinese employees. The casino building had 5 floors. His workstation was usually on the 2nd floor, specifically rooms 209 and 207. His daily job was quite simple, just walking around, observing, and helping whoever needed it. However, he worked from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day. The first strange incident. In the dormitory one day, he felt tired, like he had a fever. So he asked his manager if he could go back to the dorm to rest for half a day. He had never experienced anything unusual sleeping in the dorm before, but on this particular day, during his afternoon nap, he kept hearing sounds like children running and playing, rumbling in his room. The sound of children running is distinct from adults because their footsteps are tiny. They sounded like they were laughing and playing a game while running. Simultaneously, he also heard a woman's voice softly saying, "Hey, be quiet, don't scream." He clearly imagined a mother chasing her child who was playing. He didn't think much of it and fell asleep until 5 p.m. His friends woke him up, gave him food, and told him to take his medicine. They usually only ate for 30 minutes and went back to the casino for their shift by 5:30 p.m. So, after he finished eating, he was the only one left in the dormitory. He only heard the wind blowing from the back as he looked out the window and saw only the bamboo forest. He hadn't thought anything strange yet. He took his medicine and lay down. While drifting in and out of sleep, he suddenly remembered the mother and child from earlier. He thought, wait, children aren't allowed in our workplace. nor are women allowed to bring their children here to play. That's strange. He wondered who the woman and child were and why their voices seemed to be so close, coming from his room. He tried to rationalize it, thinking maybe it was the cook, Mrs. Ann, bringing her children or grandchildren to visit. He continued to lie down until about 6:30 p.m. when he was startled by two distinct, firm knocks on his door, then silence. He thought it was his friends outside, knowing he was in his room, teasing him. But when he sat up, he didn't hear any more knocks, and no one was outside. If someone genuinely wanted to enter his room, they would knock many times or just open the door. He lay down again for a bit, then heard the woman's voice very clearly, screaming and scolding, as if she was scolding her child. This made him sit up and go to the door, which he flung open. He looked down the entire dormitory hallway, but there was no one there at this time. So, who were those two people earlier? Despite this, he still didn't think anything of it. He didn't tell anyone about it and didn't believe in ghosts. He simply thought either he misheard or his friends were pranking him. After that day, he recovered and returned to work as usual. As Uncle Bam mentioned, his workplace was on the second floor, rooms 209 and 207. The building had 5 floors. The first floor was for Cambodian employees, the second and third for Vietnamese employees. However, the 4th and 5th floors were inactive and closed off with barriers, strictly prohibiting anyone from going up. There was even a sign clearly stating that employees were not allowed to go upstairs. These 2 floors were very dark and eerie. While the lower floors were glitzy and bright, the upper ones were dark and old. He typically focused on his work and didn't care what was on the 4th or 5th floors because it was forbidden. However, among the Vietnamese employees in his dorm, a group of about 5 to 6 young men who had worked there for a while were very curious. They wondered why the staircase to the 4th and 5th floors was blocked off. Could there be some terrible secret up there, they thought. Although it was blocked, one could easily climb over the barrier. One day, this group of young men finished work and secretly decided to go upstairs during lunch break to see what was there. The narrator heard about it but wasn't interested. His mother was a master, a spiritual practitioner, so he had encountered many spiritual matters and found them normal. Also, he didn't care to violate the rules and get scolded. If they want to go, let them, he thought. After the group went up and came back down, the narrator heard their story. The group of 5 to 6 brave young men climbed over the barrier and went up to the 4th and even the 5th floor. On the 4th floor, they saw a row of rooms, similar to the 3rd floor, but they were all closed. They weren't locked, but just closed, so they could be opened. Because these floors were inactive and empty, they were very dark and old. It was so eerie that you wouldn't want to stay long. They noticed that most of these rooms had many charms or talismans pasted on the doors, on the sides, and above the door. At first, they didn't know what they were and thought they were lucky. Chinese couplets or scrolls for good fortune. So, they recklessly began to tamper with them, tearing off many of these charms from 2 rooms, 401 and 402. Not stopping there, they went up to the 5th floor, which was similar, and continued to tear off more charms. They didn't know why they were tearing them off. Specifically, in room 501 on the 5th floor, which was also unlocked, there was a small hole in the door, like a cat's eye. One of the young men named Bao decided to look through the hole. After about 10 seconds of looking, he suddenly pulled his head back, completely silent. When asked what he saw, he said nothing. He went straight down the stairs to the 4th, then 3rd floor, and sat alone in their workstation. The other 4 to 5 guys were confused, wondering what he had seen. Annoyed. Another young man in the group named Min also looked through the hole. After a short while, Min also pulled his head back and said, Okay, let's go down. Let's go, don't look anymore. Hurry down, I'll tell you there. Don't stay here, hurry. The rest of the group didn't know what was going on but felt uneasy. So they quickly went down. The young man named Bo, who looked first, had already run down to their workstation in room 207, while the others were still upstairs. He sat there, trembling uncontrollably, biting his lip, and unable to speak. The others in room 207 asked him, but he didn't answer. About 10 minutes later, the rest of the group, including Min, rushed down. Min also sat trembling like Bo. He said, I'm so scared, I saw it, man. There were other employees and managers present, all asking what they saw and why they were scared. But they didn't dare to speak because the managers had forbidden them from going upstairs. If they confessed, it would be admitting their guilt, so they only dared to whisper the story to their group members who had gone up with them. It was much later that day when Bo finally spoke. He said, Oh my God, guys, you know what? When I put my eye to the hole, I saw the room was empty, except for a woman standing opposite me, wearing a red dress. He continued, as I slowly put my eye closer. She also put her eye closer and stared directly into mine. I got so scared, I pulled my eye back, and she raised her finger and pointed straight at the hole, as if she was going to poke my eye out. If I kept it there, he added. Her face was furious. Her eyes were raging, as if she wanted to gnash her teeth and devour me alive. I panicked, pulled my head back, and it felt like someone was squeezing my throat. I couldn't speak. I wanted to tell you guys, but my tongue was stiff. I was so scared I just ran down. I sat here and chanted Namo Imataba a few times, then you guys came down. The group then asked Min what he saw. Min confirmed, yes, what Bo saw, I saw exactly the same. I saw her standing there, clearly in a red dress, and her eyes were wide open. What's special is that when I put my eye to the hole, I saw blood overflowing from her mouth. Oh my God, I was so scared I nearly died. That's why I ran down here. Now the whole group knew. They realized, oh no, we saw it. They didn't dare tell the managers because it would worsen their situation. So they tried to continue their work, even though they were terrified. They didn't realize how serious their mistake was. They had unintentionally removed the charms that were suppressing that room. They just thought it was simple. They thought that perhaps because they removed the charms, the spirits within were able to escape and started disturbing. Soon after, the Chinese managers sent out an announcement. The employees working in rooms 207 and 209 were to stop their work. They were to go to the 4th and 5th floors, find any reusable decorative items from the empty rooms, and bring them down to rooms 207 and 209 for decoration, as there were many items upstairs. Oh my God, we just encountered her upstairs. And now we're told to go back up, open the doors, and bring down items. The group of young men thought. They certainly didn't dare go up. Luckily, there were many other Vietnamese employees in these 2 rooms who didn't know what had happened. So, they calmly gathered, about 8 to 9 people, and went upstairs to open the doors and look for fans, vases, or paintings to bring down for decoration. Since the narrator was also an employee in these rooms, he received the information and went, with the others to help. He said that when they opened the doors, they saw many items still in the rooms on the 4th and 5th floors, mostly paintings. He noticed a common feature. The paintings usually depicted two figures, a woman leading a small child. You couldn't tell if the child was a boy or a girl. Every painting was the same. A mother leading her child. Some showed a mother carrying her child, some embracing, and some showed a mother and child walking in an autumn scene with yellow leaves. These paintings, if placed in a warm, populated home, would be beautiful and cozy. But placed in a deserted, dark, desolate room, wouldn't they be scary? Nevertheless, it was an order. So, they took down all the paintings and brought them to rooms 207 and 209 to decorate any empty spaces below. What was strange was that they had never been told to do this before. This order only came after the charms were removed. He wondered if there was a connection. After moving everything, they closed the doors. It was almost mealtime, so everyone stopped to eat. In room 207, when everyone left to eat, they didn't notice that a young Vietnamese female employee named Kim was still there, slumped over with her head bowed, sitting motionless. No one knew. They thought Kim had gone with everyone else. When everyone finished eating and came back up, they saw Kim still sitting there. She hadn't gone to eat, but was hunched over, hiccuping. Someone came over and asked, "Kim, why didn't you go eat?" As soon as they asked, Kim started hiccuping and whimpering, as if someone had hit her and she was suppressing tears. Not openly crying, but constantly making hiccuping sounds. Suddenly, she raised her face and looked up. Her eyes were glaring, wide and white, looking at people with half-closed, bloodshot eyes. When they looked directly into her eyes, they saw her hiccuping and tears streaming down. They shook her shoulder and asked what was wrong, but she didn't answer. From her expression and demeanor, they knew she was possessed. The group of 5 to 6 young men who had removed the charms saw this and were terrified. They thought, "Oh no, did she get possessed because we removed those charms?" Everyone tried to ask her what happened, why she was crying and not eating, but she didn't answer. She stopped hiccuping and began to sob loudly. People were scared and knew it was serious. So, 2 of the young men whispered, "Kim must be possessed. Let's go down to the cafeteria and call Mrs. Ann and her husband up here to see how they handle it. Only they have worked here for 2 to 3 years, and they are the oldest Vietnamese here. They know about these spiritual matters and can handle it easier than us. Go call them." A moment later, Mrs. Ann and her husband came up. As soon as Mrs. Ann saw Kim's condition, she knew she was possessed. The demeanor of the possessed person is very different from a normal person. She was hunched over with her head bowed, her shoulders constantly twitching and hiccuping. Mrs. Ann gently patted her shoulder and said, "Who has possessed this body? If you have any grievances or unfulfilled wishes, just tell me, and I will offer you things. Please don't possess these young people. They are still young and don't know anything. They are pitiful." As soon as Mrs. Ann finished speaking, Kim, possessed by the spirit, raised her face and looked at Mrs. Ann. She said, "Young, huh? Young enough to come and destroy my house. Small enough to stick your eyes in and look at my house like this." She looked at my body, my whole body, and then gossiped and criticized everything. Who asked it to do that? When the person possessing Kim said that, Mrs. Ann was very surprised. Kim, still possessed, then quickly stood up and walked directly to one of the paintings that the Chinese managers had asked employees to bring down and hang. There were many paintings, but among them, there was one painting depicting a naked woman with exposed, large, ample breasts, holding what looked like a flower vase. The narrator, he said they never thought Kim would act like that. She went directly in front of the painting on the wall and exclaimed, "Here, I am in there. Oh my God, I have no house, no home, just want to be quiet here, but they come and destroy it. Stare, peep at me like this, stare at my whole body. How can I not be angry? I ask you, when someone's house is peaceful, why do you come and destroy it? Would you tolerate it if your house was destroyed?" At that moment, everyone in room 207 was frozen in fear. The narrator, who was in room 209, heard the commotion and, being curious, ran over to see. He saw Kim was possessed. Mrs. Ann, now understanding the root of the problem, spoke calmly to the spirit possessing Kim. She said, "Now, let me personally apologize to you on behalf of these young ones. They are still young and foolish. I promise to offer you proper food and offerings. We are all just employees, madam, working far from home. We came here to work for the Chinese owners, and they just tell us what to do. The owner told them to bring these paintings down for decoration, and they just brought them. They didn't know, madam. And as for that room, you reside in that painting. Young men, they speak carelessly and don't think. They didn't know you were residing in this painting. So, how about I tell them to return these paintings to their original places? Madame, do you agree?" Kim possessed remained silent, just nodding her head. Mrs. Ann then asked, "So, who volunteers to carry these paintings back to the room upstairs? If you keep them here, the spirits will disturb you, and you won't be able to work." No one dared to go because they knew the spirit was up there and it was scary. Only the narrator, who wasn't scared, volunteered. But the painting was very large and required 2 people. So, another guy named Trong joined. Trong was actually scared, but he wanted to impress a girl he was pursuing and show off his bravery. So, the narrator and Trong began to carry the paintings back to their original places on the 4th and 5th floors. Before carrying them up, the narrator took a moment to look at the paintings. He saw 3 paintings, all equally large. It was hard work for the 2 of them because the paintings were about 1.2 meters wide and 1.4 meters long. They had to carry them up the stairs, as there was no elevator, while he and Trong were holding the painting. Kim the spirit stood up and pointed to another painting still in room 207. It hadn't been carried up yet. He didn't know her intention as she pointed to a smaller painting. This painting depicted 2 figures, a mother and child, walking hand in hand in an autumn scene with yellow leaves, their backs turned. So, you couldn't see their faces and didn't know if the child was a boy or a girl. So, the 2 of them quickly carried the first painting, naked woman, up to room 501. They had to climb 3 to 4 flights of stairs and then go past the barrier. When they carried the painting to the door of room 501, the narrator noticed that the door to this room was wide open, so they quickly placed the painting on a long, flat table, like a student desk, placed against the wall. He could have placed it however he wanted, but he thought he should respect the spirit. Since she didn't want others to look at her body, the best way was to turn the painting face down against the wall. So, he placed it on the table with the image facing the wall. The 2 of them quickly rushed back, down to room 207 to get the other paintings. Luckily, by the time they got back down to room 207, Kim seemed to have been released by the spirit. The spirit was no longer possessing her body, but Kim was still a bit tired, just sitting and resting. Everyone was waiting for them, and there were still a few more paintings. Since no one was possessed anymore, they just walked leisurely, resting as they went. At this point, the two of them thought everything was back to normal. They had returned the painting, so they just walked casually. However, when they carried the second painting up to return it, they saw that the door to room 501 was now closed. The two of them, holding both ends of the painting, looked at each other. The narrator, startled, asked Trong, "Hey, you suck. Did you close the door earlier when we brought the first painting up? Why did you close it? We still have a few more paintings to bring in. We should leave the door open." But Trong replied, "Are you crazy? You and I carried this painting together and left together. How could I have closed the door? I'm not crazy. The door has to be open so we can bring these next paintings in." At this point, the narrator knew. He knew he wasn't being stubborn anymore. He told Trong, "Oh no, Trong, it's true. What they said is true. They weren't pranking us. Hurry, let's put this painting down. I'll hold it. You open the door." When they managed to open the door, a sight greeted their eyes. He said, "Dude, you know what, everyone? It was the same table, the same painting, but what was different was that the painting had been turned face out. It was as if someone had deliberately rotated the painting so that the image was facing outwards for people to see. And it was placed very neatly, because earlier, when I put it down, I just tilted it against the wall. But now, it was standing upright, right against the wall." He said, "Oh my God." And that painting depicted a woman with huge, sagging breasts, and her face looked very scary. Seeing that scene, the two of them almost crawled inside. But they still had a painting outside, so they had to try to put it on the table. As they placed it on the table, they bowed and prayed, hoping the spirit wouldn't scare them at this point. Now, he was genuinely scared and believed. After placing the painting on the table, he bowed a few more times. Then, the two of them closed the door and began to crawl down the stairs. He said at this point, he and Trong couldn't even walk properly. They just crawled. As they approached the floor of room 27, they scrambled into the room. They saw everyone still standing inside, including Mrs. Ann and her husband. Mrs. Ann asked, "What are you two doing, playing around at this hour?" He replied, "Oh, Mrs. Ann, do you think we can still play after seeing this?" After Mrs. Ann had handled everything and the paintings were returned to their original places, everyone finished their shift and went back to their rooms to sleep. They tried to forget about what happened and return to work the next day. The next morning, as everyone started their shift and worked quietly, in room 209, a female employee named Lan suddenly started laughing. She was sitting, serving customers, then just became quiet, and then started laughing. Her laugh was described as maniacal, not normal, as if she found something so funny that she laughed uncontrollably, almost as if her insides would burst out. He said everyone came to ask what was wrong and why she was laughing so much, but she couldn't answer, just kept laughing. Even though it was a soundproof room, her laughter echoed shrilly through it. Before they could figure out what to do, Kim, in room 207, was possessed again. She started looking around, twitching and whimpering like the day before. Then, her eyes welled up with tears, and tears streamed down. So, before the incident in room 209 was resolved, room 207 had another issue. And now, within a single morning shift, 2 Vietnamese employees were possessed. Mrs. Ann and her husband were quickly called again. When Mrs. Ann came up, she exclaimed, "Oh my, why are 2 of them possessed at the same time? Is the spirit from yesterday still not satisfied? We already returned those paintings to her room. Seeing that things were not good and it was a big problem, Mrs. Ann directly spoke to the Chinese managers. She tried her best to explain to them, since one of them understood Vietnamese, that these two Vietnamese employees were possessed due to the paintings they had been told to bring down yesterday, and the woman in the painting was angry. However, when Mrs. Ann explained, the Chinese managers refused to believe her. They said, "Sister, that's strange. Why is it only Vietnamese people who are being haunted? Vietnamese people see ghosts, but none of the Cambodian or Chinese employees are possessed. I don't believe it. Now, wait a bit longer, at least until tomorrow. If any Cambodian or Chinese employees get possessed, then we'll believe it. But if no one else gets possessed, and it's only Vietnamese, then we will fire those who are possessed." How could they not believe it? He thought. When it comes to the spiritual and ghosts, they already know these people don't believe, so they have to make them believe. It was not unexpected. Less than 20 minutes later, a Cambodian female employee also became possessed. Her symptoms were exactly like Lan's and Kim's. She didn't speak when asked, but her voice sounded like someone else's. Then, after being possessed, she became very tired. They decided to call her husband to take her home, as she was Cambodian and lived near the casino. When the Cambodian employee was sent home, the Cambodian and Chinese managers whispered among themselves and finally believed that the possessions were real. So, immediately, a manager drove Mrs. Ann to a Cambodian temple to ask a monk to come to the casino and investigate the ghosts. He said that when the monk arrived at the casino, there were no employees upstairs anymore. Everyone had gathered downstairs in the courtyard. As the monk stepped out, he looked up at the sky and the casino. The narrator noticed that the sky was very dark, as if clouds were gathering for rain. The monk quickly told Mrs. Ann to go up to the second floor with him. He spoke to her in Khmer, then asked her to gather everyone into room 209 for a ritual. The narrator wasn't sure if there were any guests playing at the time, but assumed the room was empty of customers and only employees were working. So, the monk asked everyone to gather in room 209 before performing the ritual. The monk took out and gave everyone red string bracelets to wear. He didn't describe the ritual clearly, but it seemed like the monk was chanting prayers. However, the monk had only just begun the ritual when Lan and Kim were possessed again. Everyone was silently listening to the monk chant when Lan started laughing again, just like before, and Kim started crying. One laughing, one crying, continuously, immediately. Kim ran to Lan, constantly burying her head into Lan's stomach. She hugged her and said, "Mum, Mum, I want candy so bad, Mum. Where are the candies? Where are the cakes? Give me candy," she cried while pressing her head into Lan. Lan, meanwhile, hugged Kim's head and laughed, constantly glaring at Mrs. Ann. Immediately, Lan the mother spirit spoke to Mrs. Ann. She said, old woman, do you remember? You promised to offer things to my 2 children. Have you offered it yet?" At this point, everyone realized that Mrs. Ann had promised the day before to offer things if the spirits stopped disturbing them and to return the paintings. The paintings had been returned, but no offerings had been made. That's why they came back to possess people. Everyone now understood that these were the mother and child. They just didn't know why they died or how they came to reside in the painting and demand offerings. The monk continued chanting prayers in Khmer, focusing on Lan, the mother spirit. The child spirit was still possessing Kim. As the monk chanted, Kim suddenly sat up and said, "It's boring here. There's nothing to eat, nothing to play." As soon as she finished speaking, door to room 207 next door slammed shut with a very loud bang. Even in the soundproof room 209, they could hear the door closing. This was strange because everyone was gathered in room 209. There was no one in room 207. At that moment, everyone realized that the little child said it was boring and nothing to play, which meant the spirit had left Kim's body and run back to its home in room 207. Indeed, at the same moment, Kim's body slumped down, no longer conscious. This meant the spirit had ascended and returned Kim's body. Only Lan's body still had the mother spirit possessing her, as she remained in the same posture. The monk continued to chant prayers into Lan's ear for the spirit to hear. Everyone got goosebumps. Realizing the child's spirit left Kim's body immediately and returned to Lan's body when it said it was boring. The monk chanted for a while longer, and then Lan, the mother's spirit, began to reveal the reason for their deaths. She said, "You all know, my two children. The little one who just went back there is my daughter. She was only 6 years old. Oh my God, her father was addicted to gambling. He took all the money from home and brought it here to gamble. He lost so much, lost terribly. I tried to stop him, telling him, 'Don't gamble anymore. If you gamble, you'll lose all our land and property. You throw everything into this, it will all be gone. Just go home and focus on working.' I told him repeatedly, but he wouldn't listen. He kept losing, then going home to get more money to try and win it back. But he couldn't win it back. That day he came here and lost again. I brought my 6-year-old daughter. My daughter and I traveled from our side, through the border, and came here to find him, to drag him home, but he refused to leave. He kept gambling. I was so sad, angry, and resentful of him that I carried my daughter, climbed up to the highest floor up there, and we both jumped down. We died instantly and landed in a heap below." She continued, "The casino owners didn't dare to reveal this incident. They suppressed it and didn't let anyone know. Only the former owners knew. They gave money for a car, and my husband drove our bodies home. But I didn't remember the way home because no one performed any rituals to call my soul back from this place. So, my daughter and I have been staying here forever. I saw those 3 paintings. There was nowhere else to reside, so I went into. Then these damned children came, opened the doors, and looked at my form, so how could I not be angry? No one offered us anything to eat before today. Today, you must offer us food." These were the words spoken by the mother spirit, possessing Lan. People present also said they heard that the Chinese owners on the 5th floor had been frequently disturbed, which is why they had pasted these charms and sealed off that floor, not daring to stay there. The Chinese managers, who witnessed this, finally knew and believed. In fact, they had been haunted before and knew about this woman, but still didn't believe the current possessions. Now, everything was clear. The monk then spoke in Khmer, saying they should prepare a basin of water and a branch of yellow chrysanthemums. They were to bring these, along with offerings of cakes and fruits, to the spot where the mother and child fell to their deaths downstairs in the courtyard. After the offerings downstairs, the monk would take the basin of water and the chrysanthemum branch, chant prayers, and sprinkle the water from the 2nd floor rooms 209 and 207, all the way up to the 5th floor, room 501, until the water ran out. The monk said that, after completing this ritual, he would help guide the souls of the mother and child to the pagoda to stay temporarily. But Mrs. Ann and her husband were asked to try and contact the family of the mother and child to come to the pagoda and bring their souls home properly. Because if they were only worshipped at home with a picture, their souls wouldn't be there. They would still be lingering in the casino. Hearing this, everyone felt more pity than fear. They performed various rituals and offerings, and it was almost 6 p.m. At that time, the souls of the mother and child again possessed Lan and Kim. Kim, the child spirit, eagerly grabbed the offerings and ate them as if she had been starving for ages. The mother possessing Lan knelt and bowed to everyone, not saying anything, but as if expressing gratitude for everyone remembering them, offering them food, and helping to send them to the pagoda. If no one had discovered them, she would have remained in that painting forever. After the offerings were finished and they had eaten their fill, the spirits truly departed. Everyone returned to their normal rest. After all this, the souls of the mother and child were temporarily sent to the pagoda. As for whether the husband or family would come to receive their souls, that was unknown. Perhaps the husband had already died too. Returning to the narrator's story, he worked there for another month, then had personal matters at home, so he returned to Vietnam to handle them. A month later, when he returned, he found that the company was already dissolving. The casino was no longer operating. He was very sad to part with his colleagues, whom he had lived and eaten with. Because of the dissolution, the employees scattered everywhere. Among them was Lan, the woman who had been possessed by the mother spirit. When Lan returned to Vietnam, she got a job as an employee at a grocery store. One evening, as she was returning home from work, she was involved in a traffic accident and was run over by a car, dying on the spot. He was truly heartbroken. She hadn't been out of work for long, hadn't finished grieving over parting with colleagues, and then received this news. Lan had died. This story is both good, scary, and carries a very relevant meaning for all of us, especially Vietnamese families with gambling-addicted husbands. The narrator is still working in Cambodia and has many more stories, so he will continue to send them in the future. In conclusion, through this story, the narrator and Uncle Bar want to send a message to everyone. Gambling, even if legalized, is never a good thing. Once you fall into it, you get stuck in the mud and it's very difficult to get out. If you win a lot, you don't want to stop because you want to earn more. And if you lose a lot, you can't stop either, because you have to play to win back what you lost. But the more you try to win back, the more you lose. And the more you lose, the more you will be detained. And who suffers? Your wife, your children, your family. If they disown you, you will have to bear the burden yourself. Many times, you might even die in a foreign land just because of your temporary greed. So, if anyone has the intention of gathering a large sum of money to go gambling, Uncle Bar hopes you will think about your family, your wife, your children, and your parents at home, and reconsider.